When we think about building a portfolio that can give us control and the option to be financially independent, we want to make sure that that portfolio is reliable. The last thing we want to do is reach financial independence, retire early, or change up our careers, all for everything to come crashing down, leaving us in a state of panic and concern for the future. And of course, what does that do? That forces us into going back into maybe a job we don't appreciate, or coming out of retirement just to make ends meet. And that is not the point of financial independence. But oftentimes when I talk about an index fund such as VTI that tracks the entire stock market, or QQQ, which tracks the NASDAQ 100, oftentimes people ask, well, why don't you just invest instead directly into Apple, directly into Tesla, and put all of your portfolio into one of them instead? And after all, they've been returning a lot more than the index fund. And in this video, I'm going to show you and explain the answer to that question of why I decided to stop investing in single stocks and go all in on ETFs or index funds instead. And with what I'm seeing, it helps me build my multi-million-dollar portfolio that I'm after. Let's get right down to the point. If we take this chart as a jumping off point, what we're looking at is the S&P 500, top 500 companies in America based on market cap. But look at the top holdings of the S&P 500. And what you're looking at is compared to September 2001 to September of 2021. So even 2021, a little bit outdated, but it serves a good purpose, because let's take a look at the number one stock on the S&P 500 in 2001. It's not Apple, it's not Google or Tesla. It is General Electric, GE, top market cap. Now, of course, it was only 390 billion back then, but that was the number one stock in the S&P 500. See, because it's weighted by market cap, when you invest in something like a VOO or an SPY, what they do is they spread your investment out. It could be $10,000 that you invest, or as little as $5, but they're going to spread that money out based on the percentage of holdings. So the top one is going to get the most percentage of your investment when you invest in that index fund. But you don't have to worry about all that. It's all automatically calculated and figured out for you when you invest in every single share of the S&P 500 index. But if we look at the top company in 2001, GE, the big dog, the number one, the one everybody wants. But if we look now in 2021, it's not even in the top holdings of the S&P 500. It's completely gone. It's missing. In fact, if you look at the stocks highlighted in that gray, those are the only ones that appear both in 2001 as far as the top stocks and in 2021. And there's not really a whole lot. So there's a lot of newcomers, which is good. That means new companies are emerging. Things are getting better for those companies. But that also means that there's a lot of companies from back in 2001 that didn't do well and they fell off. So some people in the comments, they say, well, why not invest in every individual stock of the S&P 500 instead of the index fund? Well, this is a good reason why, but I'm going to go a little bit more in depth. But right on the surface, if you look at the difference here, if I would have invested in GE, ExxonMobil, Citigroup, etc., I would have had to figure out a time to say, okay, these aren't performing as well. I need to sell and buy something new. And that could be a little bit too late. And at the same time, I'm not investing in these other companies that are up and coming fast enough. And as a result, I end up in hot water. See, the thing with the S&P 500 index fund, like a VOO, it automatically cleanses itself. It's automatically adjusting the percentages every month, every year, every quarter, etc., based on the performance of these individual companies. I don't have to worry about it. And at the same time, my investment continues to grow based on the trust, faith, and growth of the United States companies listed in this index fund. But I bet any money, if we were back in 2001 with GE being the top company, everybody'd be talking about it. Just like everybody talks about Apple now, because it's the top company in the S&P 500. But let's actually do a scenario here with the portfolio visualizer. And what we're looking at is from January 2001 to December 2021, representing 20 years, we're going to put in $1,000 a month, because what we're doing is we're building our portfolio. We're investing $1,000 a month because we want to grow. On one hand, this portfolio number one, we are going to say we're going all in on GE, because everybody's talking about General Electric, and that's what we want to do. We don't want to deal with the S&P 500. We want to take the top dog. But the second portfolio is the person that says, no, I'm not interested in that. I want the self-cleansing VOO. You could also do SPY if you want, but we'll do VOO, which represents the S&P 500. So that's portfolio number two. Let's see what happens here. So if we analyze the portfolios, look what happens. Your $1,000 invested every month grows to a sad $126,000 with General Electric. But with the S&P 500, that same scenario grows to an impressive $392,670. What a staggering difference as a result of that individual fund. But if we take snapshots in time and we only look back in 2001, GE was the Apple of today, or maybe even was the Tesla of today. But the thing is, bad things started happening. People weren't as interested. There was a new technology that came out. There was a stronger company that came aboard, like Apple and Tesla and Google and Microsoft, and they took a greater hold of the index, of the entire stock market. You know, we could do the same thing with Apple. And disclaimer, I do own Apple, but it's not really a big part of my portfolio. It's a very small percentage. My big percentage is tied up in index funds. And the reason for that is because of what happened to things like GE, or even to the point of this entire stock market list from 2001. We got Citigroup, we have ExxonMobil. There's a lot of things on here that if I would have went all in on select stocks, even if you went a few different ones, the S&P is still going to beat them as a result of just the natural way of things progressing. So you don't know what would happen with Apple, what would happen with Alphabet, which is Google, what would happen with Amazon in the future. Companies that we don't even know of today become the top in the S&P 500 20 years from now. We don't know that. Dumb things that we cannot control. That, let's say all of a sudden, iPhones start like blowing up and catching on fire. And all of a sudden everybody's like, okay, iPhone's a little bit messed up. Apple is falling apart. What's going on? And before you know it, everybody's like exiting out of Apple. More recent and relevant is the case of Boeing. Okay, so Boeing, yeah, it's not like a top dog, but if you haven't been watching the news, there's been some like serious issues with the Boeing company here. Right here, you see it on Seeking Alpha, one of my favorite investment research tools. Look at that like sharp downturn that happened right here. Now, if we look right here, this is like January. This is like hot off the press. Down it goes. Sure, it has a little bit of a recovery, but if you were flying here at 260, you're not wanting to be happy about the fact that it's now at $215. What's going on? Well, in the news, they're talking about planes that are just like the doors are popping off. And that's kind of scary. You're up like 10,000 feet in the air and the freaking door flies out. Oh my gosh. Hang on to your butts. Make sure you're buckled in. So people are afraid of the safety of Boeing airplanes. Look what happened. And see, that's stuff that's out of our control. Now, maybe Boeing could have been better at their safety regulations or something like that. We don't know. But as investors, we can't control that in the company. We're not down there on the safety floor. We're not in the manufacturing plant making sure that everything's going well. See, and if you went all in on just Boeing, your butt's hurting right now. And the thing is, we don't know what the future holds. Maybe it'll recover and go back up tenfold. Let's say they come out and say, hey, we figured it all out. Everything's great. Or what if things don't become great and all of a sudden Airbus is the #1 plane recommended by all airlines? That could be a big problem for Boeing. And then you're screwed holding the bag. But if you had the S&P 500 index fund, it's okay that this went down. And I want to address one other thing, not really related to Boeing, but related to the people that'll say, yeah, but you could have made more money with Apple. At the end of the day, if you would have just bought in 1983, you'd be like a multimillionaire by now. But the problem is none of you did. Let's be honest with ourselves. You can sit here and hypothetically think of all these things. I've done it myself. Man, if I would have even invested in Apple back in like 2010, man, I'd be so rich today. But I didn't, because I was either afraid, didn't think about it, or more importantly, Apple really wasn't that big of a company back then. Microsoft was kicking Apple's butt back in the day. If we don't remember, maybe you're a little bit younger, Apple wasn't that big back then. Now it's huge. Now it's amazing. But we don't know what the ebb and flow of the future looks like. Maybe Apple will be the top dog for 10, 20, 30 years to come. We don't know though. Maybe it'll become GE and like fall off the list and we're like, hey, remember Apple? Yeah. Now this new company, they have AI built into computers, built into cars. They kicked Tesla, they kicked Apple to the curb. We don't know that yet. But if you had the S&P 500, you don't have to worry about it. The point is, you can do whatever you want to do. Whatever you want. It's your risk, it's your profile. But if you're looking for a calmer, conservative way to build your portfolio over time and not have to sit here and worry about what the companies are up to, just buy the entire stock market with VTI or buy the S&P 500 with something like VOO or SPY. And if you want more tips on how to achieve financial independence and build your multi-million-dollar portfolio with me, check out this video next. We'll see you on the next video.